This is Friday, this is the AWS Developers Podcast, and today we're talking about the state of serverless in 2024. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where on this planet you're listening, downloading the AWS Developers Podcast every Friday in all your podcast application. Thank you for listening. Please leave us your feedback. Leave thumbs ups, small star, text comments, email, whatever. It's important for us to know how we can make this podcast better for you and more useful for you. Today, we're talking about serverless, and I have the privilege to host not only one guest, but two guests. Holly Mesrobian, your VP Serverless Compute, and Julian Wood, your developer advocate, specialized in serverless as well. Thank you for being here in the podcast. Maybe we can start with you, Holly. What is the state of serverless in 2024?
So the state of serverless in 2024, we're all here. And we're continuing to build our serverless products and product portfolio. As you heard, I'm a VP of Serverless Compute, and I know serverless has become a little bit of an overloaded term these days, but serverless compute is really a set of products that are, many of them are hitting 10 years this year. So if you think about AWS Lambda, ECS, and ECS with Fargate, are what we call our app int services, which is Event Bridge and step functions. And really the goal of these products and the evolution of these products has been to help developers build more faster using the kind of the AWS best practices on things like availability, scale, cost efficiency, security. And, that's what we're working on every day. I have a large team who's super excited by that mission. And, we're continuing to innovate and expand on those products.
So your team is responsible for Lambda, step function, Event Bridge, as you said, but serverless is much broader than that at AWS. If we look back like 18 years ago, S3 was a serverless storage service. DynamoDB is serverless as well. So how does that fit in the whole family at AWS?
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting evolution, because I think we had, kind of some of the first AWS services, like you said, S3 and Dynamo, are what's called serverless. Kind of the serverless name came along with and so a lot of times people think of Lambda and the serverless manifesto as really the start of serverless. But to your point, it's much earlier, and it's really the idea that we're removing a bunch of the operations and infrastructure from customers so that they can really focus on the value, what's unique about them. And if you think about, kind of how we think about investing in these services every year, we put a tremendous amount of our engineering resources to making sure that they work really well and deliver on that. Kind of going back, the security, the availability, the scale, and the cost efficiency. Like we start there, and we kind of think, we're putting so much into that. We don't want our customers to have to do that same work, and that's really why we do it. It's kind of like that force multiplier. We're really good at these things. We've spent nearly 18 years as an organization, and if you look at Amazon, much longer. Becoming, kind of what I would say is best in class in doing that. And so what we're trying to do is pass that on to our customers, let them build, loosely coupled distributed systems, which are what cloud systems are, and help amplify kind of their innovation and the value that they can bring to customers.
Some people say, and I can read that sometimes in blogs, that serverless is the real cloud native type of infrastructure. If we go to the cloud, then if we want to embrace the availability, the scalability, the security that you mentioned, serverless is the way to go.
Well, I kind of think about, the further up stack our customers go, the more we're able to do for them. And so then we're able to help them build better distributed cloud architectures and systems. Again, it's about what we're doing on their behalf. And so I do think that is true. But we also see, some customers want more controls, more knobs. And one of the things that we've seen muddy the waters a little bit on that serverless name has been sometimes because customers want a few more knobs, we give them a few more knobs, but then that means that you're not fully compliant with what the original serverless manifesto said. But I think that's okay, because you don't want to be so dogmatic that you're really holding back value or controls that customers need and want for a specific use case, just because you've said, well, this is kind of the North Star. And we'll continue to work on the North Star, and we'll also continue to make it so that customers need fewer of those knobs. But you kind of want to not keep customers from getting serverless value because of, hey, we said it was just this, and then it's not.
So what you're saying is that the purist serverless architect will say it's serverless only if it can scale to zero and I stop paying. And what you're saying is that sometimes if we want to innovate, we want to release something, even if it is not scaling totally to zero, but it's still serverless.
Yeah, exactly. And you'll see, I mean, I've been on Lambda now for 6 years. And that was the first serverless service. I led the engineering organization for Lambda when I first came to AWS 6 years ago. And at that point in time, we went in 2019. So I joined in 2018. In 2019, we launched provisioned concurrency, which is we keep around pre-warmed sandboxes for customers. And at the time, it was really contentious, because we're like, oh man, this is a really, we could think about one-way doors and two-way doors. This is a one-way door. We go out here and launch provision concurrency. It's no longer scaled to zero, which is one of the things that Lambda launched on. But the reality is that customers have found a tremendous amount of value in provision concurrency, and it was a step forward for specific very low latency use cases. And we've also seen it where customers want guaranteed capacity, like it kind of acts like a capacity reservation as well. But we didn't stop there, because we kept going. And in 2022, we moved forward, and we continued to launch new capabilities with SnapStart. So it's like we keep innovating, we keep adding new value. We don't stop, but sometimes you'll say, hey, we can get real value here, provision concurrency, SnapStart, by kind of adding the capabilities along the way and giving customers more control. Why we kind of work on the art of what's possible underneath our services.
And not being dogmatic, probably. So yes. Obviously you're working, both of you, Julian and Oli, very close with our customer, and you get feedback from them on almost a daily basis. Julian, what you're more working with the developers, you're developer advocate. What developers are building today in the 21st century? Okay, serverless is a thing from the 21st century, but today, 2024, on serverless. Small system, large system, what type of industry, what types of application?
Hi, Seb. I think it's weird to say, but I think there's every type of developer, every type of industry can take advantage of this serverless mindset. Now, I specifically say that not to be, we do everything and, everything is serverless and that kind of thing. That's not what I'm saying at all. But serverless as a sort of operating model is a very pragmatic way that you can do as little as possible to get the biggest bang for your buck. And we use some terms of sort of, prototype to production or agility or all these kind of things. And this is really the way that people are going to fly with serverless. And so people are building APIs, and they're doing data processing, and they are doing huge amounts of distributed work, and they are running containers and data analytics and databases and literally anything sort of in a serverless way where they are comfortable to say, you know what, AWS, we trust you with your awesome reputation for availability and scale and those kind of things. Those are distributed computing jobs that I don't want to handle as a developer. So please handle those for me. I want to focus on my code. I want to focus on my integrations, maybe my orchestration, my schema for my events, my building my Docker containers for for example. But all the rest of it, please, you're going to do a great job of doing that, and I want to, trust you to do the best things for my benefit, and I can just concentrate on what I'm doing. So yeah, huge amounts of different use cases across a whole bunch of different services. And yes, within Holly's organization and the organization we work in, sure, we talk about Lambda and ECS Fargate and step functions and event bridge. As Holly rightly says, it's way broader than this for serverless. And I think things are only becoming more serverless, and we're getting more serverless databases. And I've sort of previously joked that I sort of say the cloud was actually born serverless. As Holly says, S3 and SQS, the first services, how did you consume them? There was no provisioning, there was no capacity, there was no infrastructure. It was just an API on the internet. And I mean, this isn't even just an AWS thing. Other big clouds also started with PaaS services or application services where you just did something over the internet and you had this sort of unlimited power behind the kind of things. And it's only later in the journey, even at AWS, where you could rent a virtual machine. I mean, when AWS started, there was no EC2 that you could mention. There were only serverless services. Yeah, I think it's funny to think of the genesis of AWS was very much serverless. And I'm also 100% on board that serverless can be a name that can be used and abused in a million ways. And it's very easy to adopt a term like that, which people have seen huge success with, and then obviously look at the negatives and say, oh, well, it didn't work for this and it didn't work for that. And, certainly in my position, I see developers just taking advantage of what they can do with it and using the cloud to its best capabilities. And the cloud is evolving, doing more things for less money and greater agility. And if you happen to want to call that serverless and that works for you, great.
It's not every day that I have the chance to host a VP in the podcast. So Holly, thank you for being here. What does it mean to be a VP of serverless compute at AWS? What is your day-to-day job?
Well, I do lead that broad portfolio of services. I work across a broad set of teams. The developer advocates, Jillian here, who is representing, is one of the teams that I work closely with. I work closely with our product and engineering teams. Our operations is always incredibly important. I keep very close on that. As a matter of fact, after this, I'm going to our weekly AWS Ops review, which I attend pretty much every week to talk about how everything is running and, do learnings on operational events, look at operational dashboards. Like, we're all really deep into how we operate our service across many regions. All of my services are considered launch blocking services, so they launch in every single AWS region and run there, which is a huge. It's a huge footprint. I work with our product marketing organization. I work with our specialist organizations like our SAs who help customers build and design systems as well. So, I just work across a very broad group of team members, both who report directly into me or who work, beside me, but operate like a member of my team.
There was a lot of talks recently on social media, in the press. I read blogs saying that Amazon is going to quit or reduce investment in terms of serverless, especially because but that's an internal organization point of view. The DA, the serverless developer advocate team, moved to another team. What's your answer to this message that we're seeing all over the internet? I'll start with you, Oli, and then with you, Julian, because you're a serverless DA, so you're directly impacted by all these rumors and things that we can read on social media.
Yeah. So I think stepping full back on the journey, we continue to invest very heavily in serverless across AWS, both directly inside of my organization and then also across the entirety of AWS, like we were talking about earlier. In terms of our developer advocate team, that team reported to me directly until quite recently. Over the course of the past year, and it was a very considered decision, I looked at moving. We had brought a big leader in to lead our DevRel organization. He and I, had a number of conversations over a number of months of, hey, you're kind of leading DevRel for AWS. Should my DA team continue to report directly to me, or does it make sense for them to continue to support my organization, but report into you? And do they get more kind of force multiplier being part of that broader DevRel org? And we decided to move from me to another big leader inside of AWS, but the team still supports my organization, still is part of all of the regular kind of mechanisms that I have, like WBR,
weekly business review.
Yeah, different product reviews. Like they operate the same. They just moved from me
to another organization.
In a birds of a feather type organization alongside of other developer relations team members. And that's similar to what I have in other places, like when I was referencing my product marketing organization. It works in the same way, as does kind of our specialists, like our SAs also work in that type of way. And we collaborate. We have a number of different touch points every week across those different teams, and they operate like my organization, but they might report into a different kind of functional leadership.
It's funny to read that the press interpret that message saying, "Hey, AWS is reducing investment or stopping." One of the things I read in the last few weeks as well is that maybe it's because also serverless is the new normal. There is less need for advocacy for serverless towards customer. Julian?
I think the demise of serverless was literally predicted since it started. Probably, a week after Lambda came along, somebody was probably going to say, "Oh, this is a fad. This isn't going to be the future. This is all ridiculous." 10 years on, we still, Lambda, Fargate, all the serverless services we've spoken about, the database ones, analytics, all those kind of, continue to grow. So anybody who's telling you that serverless has run its course is crazy. And then if you flip that round and go, well, if customers are using these serverless services across the whole spectrum of things, like why on earth would AWS ever want to de-invest or not focus on that at all? So just from a personal perspective of being within the team, we had an amazing team. I mean, some of my best work friends, I could honestly call them. We'll work together. And in a big company, people are going to move around a lot. I think it was actually probably a little strange that we were all together for so long for a while. And it showed the strength of the mission we all had, because originally the Serverless DA team was formed because this wasn't just a product-specific thing. We were literally having to show the world what actual serverless meant. And there were two aspects to it, which still continue today. And, some people don't realize the different aspects of our role, but a lot of it's the outbound thing. And sure, we will, create demo applications and speak on podcasts like this and do videos and learnings. But there's a huge amount of work that we do where we act as a voice of developers. We really advocate for developers internally to make sure our product and engineering teams are having that flywheel effect of building the best products and features. And we have many ways we do that internally. We even get local teams to build with our services and build example demo applications, because an engineer who works deep within step functions or deep within ECS may not actually know our customers use all those individual services. And that's normal within a big org. And so we push internally to make sure that the product teams are doing the best they can. And as that matures, we're just going to keep doing more of that. And I think an organizational change is always different, but we had a mission as a small serverless team, and I think we were really impactful in what we did. But as serverless does get broader, well, that impact needs to be spread out more broadly across AWS. And being in a whole different org means we've actually got more resources and more help, because we've got they're good like video editors and they're organizational product managers who can help us with our sort of serverless mission a bit broader. And also, interestingly, Holly talked about the developer relations organization. That's actually got a slightly different term we even talk about, and it's actually developer experience organization, where we are really trying to move AWS forward to think of developer experience sort of as importantly as a lot of our maybe foundational things in terms of delighting developers to use that. So, that developer experience is very much taking the feedback of developers into product orgs, and then also, helping people learn it. So, I'm excited. I'm still here. I'm excited about the future of serverless, and I think we've got an opportunity now to. One of AWS's challenges, and I think everybody recognizes, is we have these awesome Lego building blocks that we all put together, and they are amazing. But sometimes they can be hard to put together. And so the next mission part of the sort of evolution of serverless is to make those building blocks even easier to use, far more broadly across the organization, because I think Holly will even recognize that we don't have customers who only work within the products that she's looking after. It's way broader than that. And so having a developer experience focus hopefully will help us all push AWS forward to be able to have better integrations and better examples and just better glue that brings all the things together.
That's important what you're saying. There are two roles in the developer advocate role. One is outgoing communication. When you see us at conference or here in this podcast or on video, we're communicating from the team towards our customer. But as important, and probably the same amount of time, even more sometimes, it's inbound communication. We take customer feedback and we have mechanisms to bring these feedbacks back to the team to review new feature design. I think that's what you're doing right now, Julian. You're still involved into building the product on behalf of our customers.
Yeah, definitely. And we are one of the inputs. I mean, it's not to say we're the only team driving that. The product managers and engineering organization, speak to customers, every single day to find out what are the next things we need to be building. Our specialist organization is also working with customers directly. And so our developer advocate role is to be slightly broader and look at sort of developers in general and go, in general, not necessarily specific customers, but, what are the trends we are seeing? And then we involved in really sometimes early product iteration where literally the ideas in the Amazon PR FAQ process where a press release and a frequently asked questions is done. And we are also diving into that going, well, have you thought about in the serverless concept, you are building this feature for Lambda and, have you thought about developers who maybe have never used Lambda before? How will this make sense to them? Or someone wants to add some new metrics or observability. And it's like, okay, well, how are our partners going to work with this? Can we give you some feedback based on, our knowledge of how a partner may integrate with various AWS services? And this will just, help to iterate the products.
And there are so many customers for which serverless is not a reality yet, neither. There are traditional ones that still think in terms of virtual machines and creating virtual machines and scaling. And having these virtual machines in the cloud, it's already a big step. So there is still a lot of education that we have to do collectively as a team towards this type of customer. And for the anecdote, I was working with students a few months ago. And for them, it's totally normal. You show them Lambda and they don't even say, wow. People like me with white hairs, the first time we saw Lambda, we say, wow, because we came from all the things before. But for students now, it's serverless is really the new normal.
Yeah, and I think as we've worked in this industry, and even I'm partly at fault for this, having worked in the team for nearly 5 years. As we evolve, we sort of understand the complexity and we help to explain all the deep, gnarly technical details. And I've done conference talks where we, delve deep into Lambda and some of these services to show how they work. But we sort of forget that beginning story, that delightful experience we also want to do where it's really easy to get going. And an example, I did a talk recently where I literally just went into the AWS console. I created a Lambda function. I asked the audience, which language should we create the Lambda function in? And, a few shouted out, and I can't remember what we picked, either maybe Node or Python or Java, created a Lambda function in the console, connected it to an API and said, and then did the URL via a QR code, and everyone in the audience could just scan the QR code and they could get the function invocation result.
They can call it from their phone directly.
From their phone right there. They was watching me build it. And then I said, okay, well, obviously we want to scale this. So if you were building on a traditional EC2-based service where you had to install virtual machines and load balancers and everything, think about what that would take. Well, let's see how we're going to do this with Lambda. And so I then ran a tool that ran 10,000 sustained requests to this Lambda function. And with our recent scaling, new scaling ways that we really, I think 12x style scaling, people could see the script running, and I could then show them the metrics behind the scene, how many actual Lambda functions are running. Within 90 seconds, we got up to 10,000 running Lambda functions. I mean, there was nothing to do. I didn't have to set a single setting or anything. It was a function I created in the console, gave people a QR code to try it themselves and said, okay, let's bash this URL, let's bash this Lambda function, see how high we can go. And, that also shows, never mind all the complex stuff we can also do, just a simple getting started, and you've got that scale backing it up on AWS. So yeah, it just gets broader and broader when we talk about all the different ways we can showcase these things.
So you, Julian, you hit on two pieces of the functionality. So scaling up and, kind of getting a working application up and running. The next piece, in which we were talking about earlier, is once that's running, we do the patching behind the scenes, so it maintains the security boundaries for you. So you're hands off, and you're not patching machines or patching runtimes. That's all taken care of. And then the other thing that we're doing behind the scenes for you is it's fully AZ resilient. So there's like invisible if there's a host failure behind the scenes or anything that goes on. That's all happening behind the scenes with you doing nothing. And I think that is the rest of kind of the total cost of ownership story. You get it up and running fast. It scales up very high levels. And then, if that's all you want to do with that application, you're pretty much hands off from that point, and there's not the kind of the operational drag that you would have in a more traditional architecture coming.
And that's a huge relief for developer, knowing that our operating systems or even the language runtime is patched automatically. I don't have to do anything for that. Sometimes I joke with customers, asking them when they did update S3 for the last time. You never do. I know S3 is not under your umbrella of of services, but it's exactly the same idea. A few years ago, for the AWS Summit in Paris, during the keynote, we had the privilege to host a customer from the insurance industry, and their message was, we choose to go serverless first. So developers, architects have to ask an exception if they want to deploy an application as containers, and even a bigger exception with more escalation and more approval if it is a traditional virtual machine. And I think that's the mindset for cloud adoption right now in 2024.
We do see that a lot from our customers, like the customers who are kind of the biggest serverless advocates are customers who are sitting in very highly regulated or have kind of very high security requirements, because they understand that because they're pushing a lot of that to us, we're going to do a lot of that, and they don't have it. It basically reduces a lot of what they have to manage inside of their organization. And then again, it kind of comes back to that agility, because they're not having to do all of that. We're doing it for them. It's meeting a pretty high bar that on their behalf. And then they're able to turn and do their innovation on what's core to their business.
And then, of course, the skeptical are asking him the question saying, and what if you want to change cloud provider? Are you locked by choosing Lambda? And the answer from that customer was quite interesting. He said, it's just a matter of cost, actually. The locking is a matter of probability versus the probability of the event to happen. Like, we want to migrate to another cloud provider versus the cost to do it. And it's a risk they just manage, just like any other risk, like a financial risk, a systemic risk. I found the approach super interesting, saying right now we have more benefits for choosing serverless first on AWS rather than trying to build like some kind of a layer to be more independent from AWS.
Yeah, and I would actually pivot that around a little bit, because the way I think about it is there's a whole bunch of stuff that we build into our services that customers don't have to build, which means that their time to build is much lower. They still have their code. Their code is their code. If they want to take their code and lift their business logic and move it somewhere else, that code is theirs. And so it's really what they're not having to build is what is the kind of the important part. And there's a whole bunch they're just not building because we're building and operating it for them.
So it's faster to release product, to release innovation for their customer as well. They can innovate, they can iterate faster as well. Where are we going? We talk a lot about the state of serverless in 2024, but if we look forward for the next couple of years.
So, from my perspective, we've seen this journey where we had kind of the serverless manifesto, Lambda, kind of full serverless, and then we have kind of the other end, which is more traditional. We've seen a lot of where the full serverless, like we talked about, provision concurrency, like we've offered things that kind of bring it a little bit back to allow customers to support additional use cases. more traditional, we've continued to innovate on. And I think what you're going to see over, in the future is just a lot more of kind of that serverless underpinning across a variety of products and services. And you've seen it over the last couple of years with all the different things that are launching serverless have certainly caused a lot of discussion at the time because they didn't meet the full serverless manifesto, but they are trying to, reduce that operational burden, the heavy lifting, and help customers get more out of their cloud provider than they have in the past.
I think serverless is everywhere. First of all, we've discussed where we've got lots of different services in AWS, be it Lambda, SQS, but GraphQL. You want to use AppSync, you want to use Textract, you want to use DynamoDB, time series databases. These are all serverless.
ETL.
But if you don't like the term ETL, loads of things. But if you don't like the term serverless, fine. I'm also never a fan of something where it tells you it's less, because even if you talk about NoSQL, like, what does that tell you? It's not SQL, but what does it do? Oh, it doesn't do SQL. Sometimes these terms are not helpful. So if you want to spin it around, then think less of serverless. So think of serviceful, where you want to use services to the full possibilities of their capabilities. And even someone like Patrick Dubois of DevOps fame, serviceful is something he likes to talk about as well, because he says, as an application becomes increasingly more serverless, it relies on these external services to provide the building blocks of the system. So if you don't like serverless, that's fine. There's no you're not losing any brownie points if you don't like a term and it's going to be serviceful. But also think in the future, things are just becoming more serverless, because that is, or more serviceful, either way of the term, because that's just natural. And this is going to be from AWS as well, but never mind, people like Vercel or Atlassian Forge applications run on Lambda. These are amazing external companies are also building on serverless. If you are wanting, other kinds of NoSQL, MongoDB has a MongoDB Atlas. That is serverless NoSQL. Memento is building serverless cache. Pinecone is building a serverless vector database. Neon is serverless Postgres. Confluent Cloud, Red Panda is serverless Kafka. So you're thinking, even something as ubiquitous as Kafka and something that really took a lot of, infrastructure heavy lifting. Well, these other companies, and in addition to AWS, are building these as serverless services, and they're using the term serverless to describe that as well. Of course, we're not allowed to talk about anything in 2024 without GenAI. But think of, Bedrock and GenAI. How much of that is using serverless? Bedrock is just an API.
Bedrock is serverless. It's totally
100%
serverless.
Think of the models that are running behind the scenes, the compute power that's actually working. But you have no concept of what that is or how that works. So marketing term may have gone mad, but directionally, everything is going to be moving to serverless. But let's not be flippant and say that is just, easy, plain sailing, because of course there are more challenges to solve. Developer experience, people will know it on AWS. And, honestly, specifically with serverless, it is going to be harder because you've got an application now running and connecting a lot of different services. I've got lots of different locations that my app's running in. Logging, debugging, observability is hard because I've got just stuff in more different places. And, even cost conversations, even though in the end, it's way more powerful because you have your cost per usage, that you can really understand all the bits of your application, how it works. But, how do you get there? How do you understand that? How do you set up the guardrails to protect yourself that if something goes wrong, or to understand your costs? So, those are the kind of things we are going to continue to work at. And it's going to be AWS, and it's going to be other companies as well. We're really good at the. Alex Debris, who's a serverless hero, had a great quote, which is, he said, AWS is great at the plumbing, but not necessarily at the painting. So I'm hoping as we go forward, the plumbing, we're really good at all the individual blocks, but the sort of painting and the look and feel of the kind of things, that's also the kind of stuff we're going to be looking at to improve. And things like Amplify, if you're doing, serverless web hosting, behind the scenes, Amplify is S3 and it's code build and it's Lambda and it's S3, but it's all wrapped up in a much nicer package that is, just abstracted from you, but way simpler to use. And Amazon Q, if we're talking about developer tooling, that is, I can't believe in 6 months how that has evolved, and that's only going to evolve in more. So the way that you're going to that you can today, you want to switch Java runtimes out, for example, on Lambda, you can just grab your code, send it to Amazon Q and say, please translate the code from this version of Java to that version of Java. Of course, you've got to do some checking, and that's going to do it. So I think of, all the code efficiencies that GenAI and serverless are going to be able to help together. So think of serverless as a set of tools in the tool belt, and developers are going to choose the right tool for the job. They're going to pick services, and they're going to build with APIs and queues and state machines and NoSQL databases and searches and key value stores, all these kind of things. They're going to put them all together, and they're going to run their own ephemeral compute with functions, or it's also going to be containers. They're going to orchestrate things together with state machines, and that could be step functions, it could be other kind of things. They're going to get their microservices to talk together, and they're going to communicate via events and be asynchronous, things like EventBridge or other kind of services. And then, this broad ecosystem that's just connecting with everything else that AWS does, everything else that our partners do, and this is just going to evolve on. So, it's a wide-ended question, the future of serverless. Forget the actual term serverless. It's the future of the cloud. It's the future of building applications, and sounds like fun.
It's great that you're mentioning Amplify, because next week on this show, in the AWS Developers Podcast, we'll talk about Amplify Gen 2, the new version, the new generation of Amplify that is using the CDK.
I promise you that wasn't a plant. I didn't know that was coming up. So.
We didn't prepare anything. Thank you for this conversation around serverless, where we are today, where we are going in the future. Thank you, Julian. Julian, who is your principal developer advocate in the developer experience team, and Holly Mesrobian, your VP Serverless Compute. Thank you for having listened to this episode of the AWS Developers Podcast until the end. And now, go build on serverless.